Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another show on Checkmate the Matrix. Today, I am honoured to have a great guest I've been excited and waiting to talk to, and I think you're going to enjoy it very much as well. And that is the People's Lawyer, the one and only David Adelman. David Adelman. So, welcome, David. Hi, and how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks, Peter. It's a pleasure to be on your program or show. And yeah, so let's have a good chat and see what we can conjure up for the folks out there.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. Just helping other people. That's what we're supposed to be here for anyway. So let's just go sort of like right back to the beginning. I'm presuming that most people will at least have, touched on one of your videos or such like or anything. But, just to give everybody a refresh, how did you actually get into this? What actually sort of like gives you the motivation to help? And what is it you're actually up to right now as well?
Well, it's all started a long time. Well, my journey into law started a long time ago at university, where I did a law degree many, many decades ago. So far back, I can hardly remember, to be honest. But I don't really need to remember my law degree because they don't teach you much law when you're studying law. It's a bit like with doctors; they don't teach you much about health. So that was my path towards becoming a lawyer, which happened in the early 80s, 83, I think I qualified as a solicitor. But it didn't take long for me to realize that I was in the wrong place. I don't like working in offices. I feel suffocated and claustrophobic. So I got out and went on the road delivering parcels where I was a lot happier. This was in London. I was breathing fresh air, so I didn't really mind that it was not a job that particularly matched my qualifications, but I didn't give a crap because I just wanted to be out of an office. Anyway, long story short, I ended up in Spain teaching English as a foreign language. That led me to learn that not just the legal system, but the education system is all wrong as well. I came back to this country in 1997. And I started teaching my my hobby, which is bridge. I've been a lifelong bridge player, and I started teaching it professionally. I'd already started doing that in Spain, actually. And it led me to getting funded to go to schools. I became something called Mr. Mini Bridge, going around the country, funded to teach a simplified version of the card game to children to ostensibly improve their maths and thinking skills. But in fact, it dawned on me that that wasn't quite right. There wasn't enough maths and thinking in bridge. Well, there's plenty of thinking, but it's not the kind of thinking that you can justify a whole lesson on. But it's, I asked the authorities, the bridge authorities, to shift the goalpost so I could go in as a social and emotional, it's called SEALs, social and emotional aspects of learning. And that brought the house down. Basically, they ignored me, they blanked me and defunded me. So that led to a certain resentment. The resentment led me to write a report, and the report went, in fact, I think it got as far as Parliament, and I was blanked again. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. We've got a very valuable activity. The kids love it. It's bringing them out of their shells. It's giving them respite from the tyranny that's in the classroom, and nobody wants to do anything with it. So that was my first real sense in certainly in this century that society is upside down, that things that are beneficial, healthy, and valuable are discarded, and things that are restrictive, suit the agenda, don't suit the individual, are promoted. And that led me to write an ebook based on my experiences called School No Place for Children. I got feedback from people suggesting that the ebook was interesting and that I should flesh it out and create a paperback, which I did. So I got lots of parents, kids, teachers involved in telling me their stories, which were way more shocking than mine, to be honest. It made my journey sound like a walk in the park, to be honest. But I like some people saying that they've been traumatized for life from their schooling. So I brought out the paper book around about 2017, 2018. And around about 2019, I was just about to, I was invited to give a keynote speech at the Glastonbury Symposium for Alternative Speakers. And that was July 2019. It went pretty well. And I was planning a tour based on the book and my experiences in 2020 when, well, we all know what happened next. And people said, well, now that we're all under the cosh, David, no one's going to be interested in what you've got to say about schooling because no one's in school. We're all off. But they will be interested in their rights. You know, why don't you use what you know about law and put that out on the streets? It just so happened that that was a good suggestion because I had been studying law, the real law, rather than the fake legalese stuff that they teach in colleges and use in offices and in courts. I've been studying that, especially since I came across a video called The Nature of the Cage with John Harris. And I came across that in 2010, 2011, I think. So I had spent a decade not just researching education, but looking at law and about the alternatives. What started me on that path was when they took away my income stream and took away my funding to go to schools, that left me with zero income. And I was not going to go back on the dole because I'd, fallen out with the government, don't want a penny from them. So I'm going to have to fend for myself. And so I was looking into the technologies of people who do want to fend for themselves in honor and are finding ways to turn everything around and question the government's right to actually take a single penny off you and utilities and councils and et cetera. So I got out onto the streets of Manchester in 2020 and just saying simple common sense things like virus, what virus, COVID, what COVID, pandemic, what pandemic, getting me into a lot of hot water, having people come up to me like with their fists clenched. So I thought, well, there's no point in having a fist fight. So what I did was I would offer them the microphone. And the microphone, I have found, is way more frightening to a thug or potential thug. And actually, some of them weren't thugs. Some of them were ordinary people. But they're so brainwashed that their rational thinking is bypassed. And all they want to do is lash out. But anyway, hand them the microphone and they run a mile. Because they just say, you obviously have a very strong opinion, sir. So if you want to prove me wrong, be my guest. And I've offered that to several people over the years, and no one's ever taken me up on that. Anyway, so out on the streets, and I start doing a little, the odd little discreet venue in Manchester, sort of spring, summer, into the autumn of 2020. Build up a bit of a reputation. So I get invited onto the promenade at Morecambe, where there's 200 people expecting one or two of us to give them a speech, and I'm one of them. Actually, no, I tell a lie. They didn't expect last minute invitation. They didn't know who was going to speak. But again, long story short, the three speakers that day were all arrested, and I was one of them. And I was actually kind of pleased to be arrested because it allowed me to be more authentic when I say to people, don't be worried about being arrested. This is all politics. It's got nothing to do with criminality. It's just pure politics. So I became a political arrestee. I was only arrested for a few minutes and de-arrested pretty quickly because it's all optics. That's what you find out. It's all optics. So it's all these great learning curves. COVID turned out to be the gift that keeps on giving, because that day, when I addressed the audience, I was about to tell them my name, and I thought, well, with all these police looking on, I'm not going to give the police a free ticket. So I just landed on my head. I just came up with, I'm the people's lawyer. And I thought it was authentic in the sense that I am for the people. I was out on the streets already giving the people the best information that I could. And I am a solicitor by training, by qualification. So I thought, okay, that's a reasonable thing to call yourself. And it stuck. And it then got a website in early 2021. And the courses that I'd already started running privately, a privacy and universal rights course, then became the People's Lawyer Privacy and Universal Rights course. And then people were panicking with their feeling victimized and locked in or locked down. So it got very popular quite quickly. And then when they eased off the restrictions, the interest in the course waned. But I think it's beginning to come back as people sense, danger lurking, disease X or whatever it is that they're planning, or a fake alien invasion, or fake climate crises, or World War III, or whatever. All these mind games that they play. People are starting to look around again for remedy, or even if not remedy, a voice of reason or a voice of reassurance. That not everybody has gone insane. Most people have, but not everybody. And there are still some sane people out there who are just standing in common sense. I was on Richard Vobes about 6, 7, 8 months ago, and he got me honest. Right, David, so let's talk about common law. And I said, you're not going to talk about common law with me, Richard. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I preach common sense, not common law. There is such a thing as common law, but it's until we bring it back as a collective, it's not happening. You can't stand on common law as an individual. With the possible exception that, and I think you're involved in this, Peter, that you can write a common law trust and possibly stand on that. But you certainly can't take common law into a court. But if, as a collective, we bring back traditional English, ancient, heritage common law, then that's different. But we haven't done that yet. And during this conversation, we might touch on something called English Counties Assembly and how they are. And I'm involved, actually. Of course, with my talks, my latest book is called Building Resilience to Navigate the Apocalypse. And I do them in collaboration with Stephen of English Counties Assembly, because I'm now moving more towards psychological motivation, and he can set out the practical lawful remedy, which is status correction, which I used to say was the thing of the mind, and I still say that, but as a collective, we have to evidence the fact that we have changed our mind and that we are in fact men and women. And then when you do that, if enough people do it, then we have a ready-made jurisdiction in which we can set up assemblies, courts, etc., etc. So I think I've covered everything. I'm in Burnley on Sunday with Richard Vobes, John O'Looney, and Lee Spell at a funky multi-speaker event, and that's Sunday in Burnley. I think that's going to be very well attended. Right, well, there you go. I think that's brought you up to date, Peter.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. I do like the story, or the event there being at Morecambe. Obviously, something must have been there, to be able to give you the idea. Look, it's the people's lawyer rather than saying the name. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. I really do. Especially if you look, it must have been at least a good attendance of police officers, shall we call them, there ready to pick up any easy pickings for them. I mean, was that during the actual lockdown? Is that the excuse they were trying to give you?
Yes, it was. They were applying a rule of not being allowed to convene more than 30 at any one event. Now, I've got to throw in a couple of anecdotes that have become urban legends, but I want to reassure people that these did actually happen. So the first one, again during the lockdown, took place in I always want to say Bassenthwaite, but it's not. It's in the Lake District. It'll come to me. I always forget the name of this place. Not all. Oh, crikey. Anyway, a small town, almost a village, actually, in the Lake District, and we had convened a meeting. Now, one of the attendees, in her beautiful, blissful naivety, she's brilliant, but she's one of those people that doesn't realize that we're in a war, and so she leafleted random places, and obviously somebody snitched, told the police, and they arrived But hang on, let me restart this. I've got the stories the wrong way round. Let me get this right. No, right. Let's go back a month. The month before, so we're looking at October of 2020. We convened a gathering of about 130, 140, 150 at Reps Gym in Preston. And Steve, that runs it, was more discreet, but he'd been targeted for his own reasons because he was running a gym during the lockdown when the police didn't think he should be. So because he was targeted rather than me being targeted, when we all turned up, 130 of us turned up, we found that 30 coppers, it was just like Keystone Cops or the Lavender Hill mob or whatever. 30 coppers blocked our path and we couldn't get in. So they were looking very nervous, by the way, the coppers, because there was way more of us than them. And in their training, in their common purpose training, they're told that we're dangerous extremists. So they're looking very, very nervous. Meanwhile, because some of us have never experienced direct confrontation with police, some of us went home, not me, obviously, because I'm there to give a lecture. So 30 of us went home. That left about 90 to 100 out of 130 to 140. So I was thinking, well, nothing's going to happen here. We're not gonna fight our way past the police. But then somebody said, David, have you got a table? And it was cold. It was October. It was cold. And I said, actually, I do. And for some reason, I had packed. I'm going to bring my two worlds together now. I had packed a bridge table. I have no idea why. Anyway, it turned out that the table was appropriate for outdoor use. So I set up and I did my lecture outside with 30 coppers looking on. And I turned to them. I said, you want to be listening to this because you've never had a lecture in proper law. So listen good. Anyway, I think it was too much for their tiny brains. And after about half an hour, most of them have gone. But there was still a caucus, you know, the head honcho, the sergeant, and 3 or 4 minions. And in the end, we all shook hands and we thanked each other for not being violent. And we thought, okay, all right, it was a 1-1 draw because they stopped us from getting in, but we ended up friends, and well, so we thought. No harm was done, and I got the lecture done. Anyway, a month later now I'm in the Lake District, so I've got this story the right way around. And some of us, including myself, have learnt the lesson from Preston, and we're in a community centre, and I've get to the point in my talk where I'm talking about what to do if the police arrive. And someone said, they've arrived. And I thought, oh, all right. I'll be honest, I was actually in, a little bit, what's the word? A little bit apprehensive, because I thought, oh, I hope they don't sabotage my talk. But I just said I pretended to be cool. You know, I was like a duck, you know, like cool on the top, but my little knees flapping underneath. And I said, tell you what, right, folks, don't panic, just shut the doors. So we all locked every conceivable door on the inside, that we could, from the inside. And 2 women, maybe even 3, said, I can't handle this, I can't cope with this. And I said, why not? I said, because my ex is a copper and he used to be violent with me. So this was triggering stuff for the audience. So I said, okay, I get that, but we're on a roll here and we're committed to keeping them out. And I said, they can't get in, they can't bash the door in. Said all they can do is knock 3 times. And sure enough, they banged on the door. They don't just knock, they absolutely banged on the door. You know, we're all jumping in the air. And but they can't say a word because that would be breach of the peace. So they bang on the door, and once, twice, 3 times. They have a rule of 3, and we stayed quiet, and then they have to leave the building. But when we looked outside the window, we could see that they weren't going anywhere. They were just waiting for us to come out. So I finished the lecture, and we all went out, and it was all very convivial. And they got their own back by stopping 6 of us for on-road traffic issues, to be honest. So they always have to have the last word. but there you go. So that was, I don't know what got me started on this, but yeah, so by the time I got to Morecambe, this was another month later, I'd become one of those people that was potentially being targeted. And then I was de-arrested that day at Morecambe, and I was only served paperwork 6 months later after becoming an official The People's Lawyer. And so I became then a person of interest, targeted individual, and they traveled 40 miles with a piece of paper to serve me personally. But that story has a happy ending because I sent them notice of conditional acceptance and they dropped whatever stupid charges that they had concocted. So there you go. I kind of talking for so long, I've forgotten what we were talking about, but there you go. Go on, Peter, remind me.
Yeah, no, I mean, all you were saying is just like, there was a few anecdotes you wanted to put in just to make sure people knew that it had happened and it was true and real, But I bet you never thought that the actual game of bridge would come to assist a so-called revolution, eh?
Well, the thing is that another thing that COVID has done for me, when I call it the gift that keeps on giving, I know some people, I do accept, but make no apologies for saying things like that. But I do accept that some people have lost loved ones. Some people have gone into depression. Some people have gone into bankruptcy, into all kinds of crises. And they will probably curse me for saying things like COVID for me is the gift that keeps on giving. But we are in a war, and there's always casualties in a war. There's winners and losers, and the winners are the ones that remain standing when the battle or the war is over. So we have to acknowledge that you cannot escape a war unscathed. But what I'm saying is I'm being very personal, not expecting anyone else to see it my way. I'm just saying that this is my truth, that it accelerated my progress. It made my message louder and clearer. It made my message more comprehensible to myself. It made me realize why I had been born. Because until COVID came along, I'd always had these residual doubts, like, what am I doing on this planet? Am I even on the right planet? And then COVID comes along, and okay, it all makes sense. All my training, all my life experience, the fact that I've done lots of public speaking with a microphone, studied law, even been a lawyer in inverted commas, because I wasn't really a lawyer. I'm much closer now, but back in the day, I certainly wasn't. It was just their version, which is not a lawyer at all. And it all makes sense that, and funnily enough, I'd always dreamt when I was younger, what would I do in the next World War? Or if I was transported back in time to the Second World War, and I speak languages. So I think, well, what I would do is translate, interpret, keep an eye on the enemy, translate what they're saying and give it to our boys and girls on our side. And so that's essentially what I'm doing. I keep an eye on the cabal, translate what they're doing. I've even created something called a globalese lexicon, which hasn't gone public yet because I'm still touching it up. It'll go out as a PDF that anyone can access. I'll put it on my website and I'll put it across all the channels. And it translates their language into English, basically, into a recognizable English. For example, like an example would be for your safety. Some of them are easy to interpret, For your safety translates as so that we can surveil, control, and if you do anything, So virus translates as toxin. It doesn't translate as something that can be coughed, sneezed, or bled onto somebody else. It's a toxin that they put into the water, the air, and into the injections. So this lexicon hopefully will help reassure people who are being gaslit, and we're all being gaslit. So it will be a gaslighter's guide to the galaxy. Well, it's not the gaslighters, it's them. It's the gaslit's guide to the galaxy, kind of, there's so all my dreams have come true in the sense that I always thought I would be fighting a war, a big war. And now that COVID has arrived, and it's not gone anywhere, it's still there as a threat, not the actual COVID, because as we know, it doesn't exist, but the threat of tyranny. It's breathing down our necks, and we have to be vigilant. So COVID was the dress rehearsal. And what I say in my talks now is that, well, we've done the dress rehearsal, we've done the audition. Some people passed it and some people failed it. And now we've got to be ready for the big one, which people like Gates and Biden call the next pandemic. You have to listen to them carefully. They don't say another possible pandemic. They say the next pandemic. So you have to take their intentions seriously, and they certainly intend another one. And the question is, when's it going to come to pass? But yeah, so just reiterating, COVID to me has just galvanized me into action. I stopped doing my echo chamber work on Facebook. I was actually thrown off Facebook overnight about 4 or 5 years ago. I think even before COVID, 2019. Absolutely thrown off Facebook. Woke up one day, I was off. And that happened with PayPal as well. That was more recent. That was about a year ago, PayPal. So whatever I'm doing, I'm obviously, or whatever I'm saying, I'm obviously saying the right things from our point of view, because I keep getting thrown off platforms. And it's being out on the streets and being accessible to real people who can look me in the eye and check me for authenticity. That's my priority. And going back to the idea of what I'm up to now is I've joined a resistance movement, and we're out on the streets every Saturday handing out the light paper and yellow boarding around the county of Kent. I don't mind saying what county I'm operating from, because I think that's public domain knowledge. So it's something called the Kent Resistance. And on a good day, we can put out over 2,000 papers, light papers, in 2 hours, because we have almost like a military operation. We find black spots for traffic lights, roadworks, and there's anywhere between 20 and 40 of us. And, you know, with military precision, we just get the papers out there. If you try that as a pedestrian on foot, it just doesn't work. You'll be lucky to do 100 in 2 hours, but you've got to trap the motorists. So that's the most, and that is so exciting, because talking of echo chambers, when you go out onto the streets, you're no longer in an echo chamber. A lot of people are nervous about doing that because they think they'll get loads of abuse. And a year ago, they were getting a fair amount of abuse, but a year on now, and in our ranks, we've got ex-coppers. That's how, and well, obviously an ex-lawyer, that's me. And we've got ex-coppers. And recently a group of current coppers came to ask us what we were doing and to remind us of you know, not to stand on the road. And they ended up having a long chat with two of our boys who are ex-coppers. So, you know, it's all changing. And I regularly hand out the light paper to police transit vans. You know, so the tide is turning. We've been out on the roads, and we make a point of being civilized, polite, and we're there to make friends, and we're there to counter the propaganda that anyone who disagrees with the narrative, by definition, must be a dangerous, far-right, violent extremist. So it is a charm offensive, and I always urge people that whatever you're doing, whatever truth you're standing on, keep the emotionality to a bare minimum, because you will only persuade someone who doesn't immediately see your truth. You will only persuade them if you are seen as civilized. And even then, you probably won't persuade them. But one thing we do know is that if you're not civilized, you've got no chance. Their programming will kick in, and they'll just go, another violent extremist, nut job. Do not engage, you know. And so we have to get past their cognitive dissonance by being nice, you know, reasonably well dressed, you know, like not too scruffy, we keep the scruffy ones at the back.
But the thing is, talking about going on about being a right-wing extremist. I mean, they've actually said that now, point blank. Like little fishy Rishi there trying to get up a step ladder so he can see him, and then actually like spouting it out that we're worried about this extremism that's creeping into politics or creeping into everyday life. Especially when like they had that election and George Galloway, like and let's face it, between the two of them, he's the only one that actually received any votes whatsoever anyway. So it's a joke that he actually said that, but the whole thing's a joke and a pantomime anyway, in the way I see it. But so with that in mind, though, I totally agree. I think you've got to, if anything, you've got to now be even more reasonable and polite and laid back and friendly towards anyone who doesn't sort of like agree with you. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. It's if this is more of an info war and a psychological war than anything, and I'm sure that it is, then the way to win that war is to seem to be the side that is the most reasonable and has the most common sense and civility. And so what we need to do is allow the other side to shoot themselves dead, because they're the ones that have the command of the language, and they're the ones that sound very plausible and very reasonable, but they only sound plausible and reasonable. But if we can sound just as plausible and reasonable, then in time, people will start to see through the lies of the mainstream narrative and into the truth of what we're saying. As the lies become more and more obvious, that someone who's talking about extremism and racism and all the isms is clearly party to an international genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And more mainstreamers will start to see that, and they'll start to think, well, hang on, this guy's talking about extremism, and yet he's involved in, he's like a lackey for the state of Israel. So what's going on here?
Yeah.
But because the globalists have seen all this coming, they've keep a tight rein on people's ability to speak out using this anti-Semitic label, which I've had. It was Antifa. I was in Norfolk about a year ago, and I had 3 gigs, the same gig, cancelled 3 times at the last minute. We eventually managed to put it on because the word went round to the. Sorry, what was that, Peter?
Yeah, no, I remember that. I remember, like, you putting some posts up about that. Yeah, like the 3 on the 1. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So, and all these hosts, venue hosts, freaked out because they were getting in effect criminal phone calls threatening to, I wouldn't say blow their legs off, but hurt their family if they accommodated someone who's clearly transphobic, anti-Semitic, and God knows what else. And the joke is that my lectures are dangerous in the sense that they're full of truth, but I don't do politics. I don't, and I don't say anything that, I mean, my really dangerous stuff is done online, but when I'm live, I'm just focused on giving people information that will help them rather than, stuff that's in effect only gossipy. Some of it may be true, but it's gossipy, and I try and avoid gossip when I'm doing my live, because I've come a long way and I've come 200 miles. I've not come 200 miles to gossip. So yeah. So if we can going back to the original point, if we can be seen to be, and if we're going to attract ex-coppers and ex-professionals into our ranks, and there are loads of them in our ranks, the trouble is that they're not used to being vocal out on the streets, and they're not used to putting their necks on the line. And so we still have the this innate fear of standing up to be counted that we all inherited from schooling. So I'm taking everyone back. People know I'm a bit of a broken record when it comes to schooling, but really we need to outgrow our indoctrination and our schooling and pull out those thorns in our sides that are triggering us and make us feel very nervous, very apprehensive, and very shaky when the spotlight is on us. But one by one, we're coming out into the open and standing up for truth. And that's all we can do. And as long as we do it peacefully, without any incitement and without name calling, there's no need for name calling, really. I mean, one of the things I've just partially rewritten the book that I wrote initially 6 years ago, based on research before that, which is School No Place for Children, in case people haven't heard of it. I've partially rewritten it, but I still avoid the temptation to call out the transgender issues in the classroom, the transgender agendas. Because the reason being is because it's so grotesque, it's too easy a target. And I don't want people to think that, well, if we just get ordinary teachers back in, Bible bashing and talking common sense and get the transgender agenda out of the classroom, everything will be fine and hunky-dory. Well, it won't. And the reason being is because the schooling system has been part of the global agenda for 150 years. Yeah. And so it's not, please, people out there, do not think that just in the last 2 or 3 years, things have gone insane in the classroom. They haven't. Things were never sane in the classroom. And there's a couple of stories that highlight this. Well, there's a video going around. It's called Fleas in a Glass Jar. So you put fleas in a glass jar and you put the lid on and you leave the lid on for 3 days. I think it's 3 days, 2 days, 4 days. I'm not sure exactly. But after that amount of time, you take the lid off the jar, but the fleas will not fly out. They are permanently restricted to the jar. That, my friends out there, is what schooling means and what schooling does. And so what we need to do is learn, first of all, that A, the lid has been taken off. B, that there is pure oxygen out there. And C, that there is room to fly off and be our true selves. So if we can fly, fly. If you can swim, swim. If you can run, run. And if you can sing, sing. And if you can do humor, do humor. That's another thing that can undo the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative has no sense of irony. It has no sense of humor whatsoever. There was, I think it was Thomas Binder, the German doctor, was put away not long ago during COVID, actually. He was put away in prison, actually in a psychiatric ward, when he was simply saying that, according to his scientific research, COVID is a hoax. And next thing you know, he's being arrested by 60 police officers, 60 in Switzerland, not a country renowned for violent protest or criminality. Anyway, he's given a psychiatric assessment, and the first question is name. Second question is what day of the week is it? And he doesn't use irony for those questions. Third question, the psychologist says, what year are we in? And his answer was 1984. And that got him committed. So he thought it was funny. You and I think it's funny. But these psychopaths don't have a sense of humor. They have an agenda, a relentless agenda. And to them, the answer 1984 is evidence of insanity to them. Yeah. This is what we're up against, folks. So that's, again, a gentle reminder that we cannot ever assume that someone whose eyes are suddenly blazing, like the guy in John Lewis, where during the one of the big marches in London, who I was standing 1 meter behind, turned round and was with absolute insanity and psychosis in his eyes, screamed at me, 2 meters. And obviously I just stood there in disbelief that it was an issue because he had a mask on. So I'm just in real life, common sense. You know, I'm thinking, well, if you've got a mask on, why do you need me to stand 2 meters away? And then he screamed again, 2 meters, and his eyes even more ablaze. And I thought, oh, I've got to say something now. Excuse me, sir. I said, are you trying to tell me that your mask doesn't work? Now some people will sense the irony, the sarcasm, the humor in all of that. But to him, it was a red rag to a bull. And he was so insane in that moment that the next thing I know, he's standing in my face. So he wasn't even 2 millimeters away from me now. You know, and if I'd have been more quick thinking than I am, I would have just said, excuse me, sir, but you obviously would like to discuss this further. Would you like to come outside and discuss it with 1 or 2 of my friends? And I had 1.5 million friends walking down Oxford Street. So anyway, in the end, I just said, I think we'd both better take a step back. And we did. And then the demon or whatever it was that was controlling him at that precise moment in time lifted, and his eyes returned to a normal appearance. And it's almost as if he went into instant amnesia and forgot the last 30 seconds or 1 minute or whatever it was. So what I'm trying to say is that we not only do we need to be civilized and careful and put on a good show, but we have to be mindful that in worst case scenarios, we can trigger the demon, whatever people understand by the demon, the thing, that takes them over in a crisis moment. So, you know, just a note of caution out there. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of like, well, I've been running martial arts gyms for over 30 years, and you know, we were running a homeschooling class for homeschooling kids. Really, it was more about just like having fun and physical education or physical movement rather than, you know, learning any martial art or anything like that. But the kids loved it, you know, and we did it specifically for homeschool children. And a lot of it was really because of like looking at it, not only from my personal experience, but like from your book as well. And then like you just been like talking about like, you know, like 2020 and everything going on there. And some of the people who had used to be part of like our school, you know, obviously over 30 years, they come and go like, you know, quite regularly. And they contacted us and said, you know, we want to start, we don't want to go back to school with the children. We just don't want them in there. It's like, it's become even more of a toxic environment. You know, but what we're concerned of is if we do that, then there's absolutely no physical activity, which I'm not really sure. I don't think there's that much physical activity left in school anyway. But by the by, so we ended up doing, you know, that it was called it a martial arts class, you know, but it was a physical activity for children in a gym. So they had equipment, they could put like gloves on, they could go in bags, and you know, it's not an everyday occurrence for the vast majority of children. So it's different, enjoyable. But as I say, you know, I'm not just saying it, it was partly because of your book as well. But because of that as well, a lot of the things related to me, because I think, well, I don't think, I know some of the worst things that's ever happened in my life actually happened in school. And I think, you know, like when I was in school, at least I was in a Roman Catholic school, and it was extremely, you know, some people may call it strict. I would call it abusive. I used to get physically punched and kicked and smashed, like, you know, your head onto the desk and whipped with leather belts and they used to actually make you stand down. Sometimes they would even have a teacher holding you down on a chair, so they would be higher than you, and they would actually run and whip you with a leather belt. And all that's true. And it wasn't just me. It was, I used to get a lot more than others because I would always be questioning. And then the more they actually hit me, the more that I would actually argue back. I detest bullies and unfairness and injustice, which is why I'm sort of like speaking out the way I do, and why we're talking, me and you, together today. So for sure, I get all of that stuff about the schooling and the education. When you mentioned it there, that it's been part of the global agenda for over 100 years. Well, in reality, we know that they actually started it, because the Rockefellers were part of that. They are hugely part of the global sort of like agenda, we'll call it then. And it's them, from that Prussian style, isn't it the Prussian style that they actually designed the actual education or indoctrination system?
Yes, it is, because the Prussians, who we now know as Germans, kept losing in battles to Napoleon, and they couldn't. And they were very proud people. They think, well, we should be beating these French soldiers. We're stronger, we're fitter, we're taller. But what they hadn't factored in was that Napoleon, who was better at the art of warfare than the Prussians, had taught his soldiers to obey orders without question, whereas the Prussians just left their soldiers to think things through for themselves. And that was a losing strategy in warfare. So they created military schools, and that model was then adopted by the British Empire. And you know the rest, because the next thing you've got is military schools all over the world. And so that word is missing from the schooling system. The schooling system, the word missing is military. So when you send your boy or girl to school, you are sending them to military school, to a boot camp. And we all know that over the years that we've all suffered at the hands of the odd sadistic teacher and the odd sadistic fellow pupil. But what we haven't taken on board, either through indoctrination or distraction, or shrugging our shoulders, oh well, that's life shit, then you die, or something else called Stockholm syndrome, in which you end up apologizing for your captors and your oppressors. What we haven't taken on board and we haven't seen through fully, and that's where my book, I hope, will contribute, is that the actual system itself is the sadist. And let me give you an example, again, from real life, because I do prefer to give real life examples of what I'm saying, because otherwise it's just nowhere near as powerful. I know a family that live a couple of miles down the road, and the father is a deputy head. So he's got, no obvious reason to call out the schooling system. He's part of it himself. But during the mask insanity in 2021, where masks were being put on boys and girls in schools, he turned to his wife and said, our girls are not wearing masks. And the wife said, no, they're not. But they're being expected to in school. What can we do? And they came across my book, and the book inspired them to just take the girls out of school. And the story would end there, and they're still out of school and will never go back. The story would end there. And the girls at the time were 8 and 9, and they're now 10 and 11, or 11 and 12. No, 10 and 11, I think. The story would end there. But what they found was that when they recreated the schooling environment, so they sat around the kitchen table looking at textbooks, the girls, that something clicked in their brains, and they wouldn't no longer just go to the toilet. They're in their own home with their own parents. They would actually put their hand up and ask for permission to go to the toilet in their own home with their own parents. And that was an absolute shock to the mum and dad. And then the mum and dad told me, and that I thought, well, there you go. That's the only story that I need to hear to prove anecdotally, of course, but to prove that what the nature of the schooling beast is. It is now making children need or feel the need for permission to do anything, including the most answer the nature's call the most basic need. And what we're finding now, if you dig a bit deeper, is that children are coming home with urinary tract infections because they're not allowed to go to the toilet. And sometimes the converse is true. They're not even allowed to drink. So to stop them from even asking to go to the toilet, they're not allowed to drink. So what we're dealing with, this will, if you don't have kids, or if the kids are not telling you what's going on, because they are in effect sworn to secrecy, because there is there's been for some time now a movement in schools to criminalize parents and to glorify school. So you can call that what you like, globalism, communism, or whatever. But at grassroots level, it just means that children are being victimized and sadistically bullied by the system. But as if that weren't bad enough, they're being told not to tell their parents because the parents are not people that can be trusted, because some of them read the light paper, some of them are far right extremists, and they have strange views, and you're much safer in school. And it's gone to such a degree now that, in fact, when a boy or girl is naughty, they're no longer given anything called detention or punishment. Those words are being removed from the curriculum or from the classroom. They're being given something called reset. And they're being made to feel proud of the reset. I hope people are joining the dots here. So this is clash fob terminology now in the classroom. And some of them are now going home boasting with immense pride to their parents. Oh, mum, dad, guess what? I've had a reset today. So not only are they being punished for things that are not punishable, but they're being made to feel proud. And those boys and girls will grow up very fast, and they'll be the ones that when they see the word reset, they will be, from the World Economic Forum, they will feel proud to be involved. This is what we're up against, folks. This is the nitty gritty. It's not injections, because you can take or leave an injection. It's not food, because you can grow your own. And it's not nuclear weapons, because according to some, they don't even exist, but that's another day's work. It's the fact that our boys and girls are being prepped for an artificially intelligence-run world in which they don't have a say and they are proud to be imprisoned in. And that is what we are up against. Nothing else. The rest is distraction. You know, even if we're short of food for a few weeks, we'll just lose a bit of weight. But what we're up against in terms of the future of humanity is this, fifth generation military warfare now being applied in the classroom, in which you don't even know that you're being indoctrinated or punished and restricted for your future. And it's, you know, it just, if boys and girls grow up to be the kind of parents that will continue that's even if they're not infertile from the jabs, then, you know, it doesn't bode well for a huge chunk of humanity. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's just shocking there, you know, like that, to hear that word reset, you know, like so instead of having you know, like a detention, then you're having reset. Whereas, you know, I mean, I had like plenty of detention, but I would always be trying to run away from it. But yeah, I mean, like the ridiculous things that I remember happening, you know, when I was in the like 60s and 70s. So I know it's a long time ago, but, you know, they used to make you stand out in the rain, pouring rain, you know, just stand in the middle of a field in a pouring rain because you were asking questions, or you say, well, why are you going to do it that way? Why can't we do it a different way? You know, whatever it was. I'm not saying at all that I was like some kind of like model student or a saint, you know, because I was a bit wayward. I'll give you that. But I was definitely questions all the time. and you know, I certainly wasn't appreciated. But they were incredibly violent. And if you think about it now, you know, like you've got literally like grown men. I mean, would you, in your like wildest dreams, have like think that it's okay to grab the hold of like an 11 and 12-year-old boy and punch them in the face or in the head and smash the head off the desk and then throw them on the ground and then go and get a leather whip? Would you think that that would be normal and acceptable behavior?
Well, anywhere else, it would be a very, very, very serious crime. Anywhere else, that's a crime. And it's not just a crime, it's a serious crime, and it's completely imprisonable for a number of years. No, what we do, we have collective amnesia. We've forgotten. Some people have read my book and said, David, I thought my problems were down to my family. And they've said, crikey, I've realized it wasn't my family, it was my schooling. And we cannot overstate what schooling is doing to us, has done to us, and is doing to generations coming through, and is threatening to do worse. It's just getting worse. So we have to keep our eye on the ball, and we have to keep mindful of the fact that there is the boys and girls are caught in a bit of a pincer movement. You know, they've got parents who are now the product of a sadistic system. So they've got a lot of parents who take great delight when their own kids are punished or reset or whatever at school, because it saves them the trouble of doing whatever it is to the kids. So it's not just, people out there, please don't think that I'm pouring scorn on the schooling system. A lot of parents also need to stand up and take responsibility. And the obvious thing to do is to keep the boys and girls at home out of harm's way. And people will say, oh, it's all very well for you to say that, David. You don't have kids. And I don't, and I have to confess that. But the point is that once you get wind of and know what's going on, then that should motivate you. And especially if there's two of you, so one of you can keep going in the world of commerce, and the other one can be the carer of the boys and girls. And you can share this, you can timeshare, because the more people are pulling their boys and girls out of school, the more infrastructure there will be, and the more possibilities and options there'll be for children to be timeshared. And when I was in schools teaching, I think about 5,000 boys and girls a card game, I never had trouble with any of them, because I was teaching something that was non-threatening, liberating, engaging. So I never had to raise my voice, and I wouldn't anyway, because I don't believe in that. And talking about raising your voice, what a German scientist is now finding, and it features in my book, that if you raise your, so this is not just beating the crap out of a boy or girl, usually a boy, but not always. This is just raising your voice and shouting at them and intimidating and telling them off. This shows how serious this is. If you raise your voice and intimidate a boy or girl that's not old enough to understand why you're doing that, that causes physical brain damage to the hippocampus. And this German scientist is finding that virtually everyone he tests, everyone, has got their hippocampus damaged. And what that means is, for those people who are not medically or technically minded, the hippocampus is part of the frontal lobe that gives you your capacity to critically think, ask questions, put things in context, be objective, and be rational. So I call it the Spock part of the brain, Spock. And if that is compromised, then you're thinking, well, you'll stop thinking and you'll just react, fight or flight, like that man in John Lewis that had his mask on and his eyes were blazing. No critical thinking, no sense of humor, nothing. So, and humor could be part of your hippocampus, the ability to join dots and see ironies and other realities. So what we're dealing with is entire cohorts of people who, not just from schooling, also from poor parenting, to be fair, to be as balanced as possible, have got their brains damaged. Now, is there a remedy? Well, this German scientist doesn't know, or at least I haven't seen anything. But the main remedy for any problem is to at least awaken to the fact that you do have a problem. So there'll never be a remedy to a problem that you don't know you've got. That's all we do know. But since we are beings of infinite potential, we will surely be able to remedy the damage to the hippocampus, because the brain can create new cells and we can heal traumas, no problems. There's lots of trauma healing techniques, and we can liberate ourselves. It can take a month, a year, 5 years, but it can be done. But like us, just to reiterate, it can't be done if you don't know. It's a form of nescience. Nescience is not knowing what you don't know. And the system, in its delicious evil, has got people in such a state that not only are they damaged, but they don't know that they're damaged. And even worse, they think that the people that did them damage were actually doing them favors by writing out their qualifications and by giving them pass marks or top grades. It's when we look back sometime into the future, we will scratch our heads and wonder how we ever allowed them. And people say, who are they? But I'm not going to go into that right now. I don't think we've got time. But I think most people watching this will have an idea how we allowed them or it or the enemy or the cabal, whatever you want to delete where applicable, to get away with this. But we did. And that's what COVID, another reason why I call it the gift that keeps on giving, because that was the line in the sand. That enabled some of us to say, that's enough, no more. No more collaboration, no more compliance, no more funding or sponsoring evil. We're out of here. And then you look around and you think, well, there's not that many of us. But then 4 years on, there are quite a number of us as our forays onto the streets of Kent. Because I have to tell you that whereas a year ago we'd get an equal number of middle fingers and thumbs up, now the thumbs way outnumber the middle fingers and the, get a job or get out of our town. So we're winning the info war, but we've got to be mindful that we may win the info war amongst our over 30s or over 40s, but we've got to keep an eye on the kids big time.
Yeah. I mean, that really hits home, talking about the hippocampus and the damage that can be done through that. So even if you take away like the physical, and it is, I would say it's physical abuse, no matter what. I actually went for, have you ever heard of a bioresonance reading?
Yes, I have. I've got my fingers in lots of pies. I'm like an info hub. That staircase behind me is like a stairwell to higher realms. It's also the attic, but it's like, one of the reasons that I think I was born was to process an awful lot of information and to go through it and then sift it out. So I'm like the hub in the middle of a wheel. So the info comes in, I sift through it, and then I send it back out to another spoke on the same wheel. So that was a very long-winded way of saying, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, me and Janine, we both just had a bioresonance reading, and it's obviously I know these things exist, and I've seen them before. So anyway, I only did mine because Janine was getting a lymphatic, something about the lymphatic system. Anyway, cleansing, isn't it? Draining your lymphatic system, and it says, oh, you can do this. And I was persuaded to do it. And I'm very happy to say that this is the most boring one I've ever seen. Everything's balanced. There's nothing out of balance apart from your lungs, physically very well and everything. And the lungs was the actual emotional stress that's been placed into the lung area. And they said because of the church. The woman's reading it. She goes, I've never, ever seen this in a reading in all these years. But the way that I was looking at it was thinking, well, I grew up in a Roman Catholic family. It was like a Scottish, Irish, Roman Catholic family, which is what it is. And the first school that we actually attended, I mean, I was actually put into care when I was younger, but then like, but the first school that we actually got put into was part of the church. The church was on one side, came out of the back, there was whatever hall, and there was the school itself, and it was only small. And then as soon as you actually got to a certain age, you went round the corner, which was right opposite on the other side of the church. And a lot of the classes was run at least partly by nuns, and the priests were always in there. And I never ever had any problem with any priest or anything like that. So I'm not indicating it. I'm not saying anything a lot like that way, or sexual abuse or anything. Not what, none at all. And you know, but the nuns were very violent. I tell you that. You know, and it just sort of like strikes in, and you think, like, all I can remember all the way through school as well is like screaming and shouting. You know, they're always shouting at you and like being very aggressive all the time. So, you know, you feel as if you're under stress all the time. And I remember, like, in one maths class, no, it was like you were in the same classroom for all of the lessons, and the teacher would make you stand up, and you had to answer whatever question it was. And if you got it wrong, you had to stand on your chair. And then, like, if someone else, you like answered the question that was sitting behind you, you had to go back. And the further away that you got, the stupider you were supposed to feel, you know. And you just think now, like, how on earth can that be seen as education or even just caring for a child? Because I remember, like, I must have only been like, 4, 5, 6, about 8 or 9, you know, and having these, and this one woman teacher that I'm talking about, she used to actually put her knuckles like this, put that up there, and punch you in the head with it like that. Such a loving school we went to.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think I got off fairly lightly compared to that, to be honest, Peter. I've got 2 stories. One is how I personally deal with boys and girls who I think may have not quite got it right. So while I'm thinking of the other one, I'll tell that story. So people like you and I, Peter, teach the power of the question, that in order to be sovereign, for your sovereignty to trump anybody else's, you need to be the one that's asked the final question, which goes unanswered or answered without honor. And I use that same strategy with boys and girls. So rather than intimidate them, enforce them into compliance, because that would be hypocritical on my part, I ask them questions. And I've never had a problem with boys and girls ever. Well, I'll just cut myself off to say that once when I was running a bridge class, it's called mini bridge when you're doing it simplified with kids. I was running an after-school mini bridge class with 8, 9-year-olds, and the noise levels were going up like out of control. But I'm looking around, and there's about a dozen of them, just to see if anyone's bullying anyone or suffering. No, they're all happy. So it's very, very noisy, but it's happy and smiley. So I just let the noise build up. Meanwhile, some officious, sanctimonious, self-righteous, narcissistic teacher pokes her head around the door because it's after school time, and she goes, "You can't control your children." Now, this was years and years ago before I found my own power. If she'd have said that to me now, I would have given her some, real put down comeback, like, you need to get a life, missus. But anyway, the point is that what was actually happening is that they felt so stifled during the day with teachers like her that they come to me, and now they can breathe a sigh of relief. They can be themselves. They can shout. They can scream, do what they want. And I'm operating the universal law of harmlessness. Well, doesn't look like anyone's doing or suffering any harm. So I'm happy. Carry on, kids. So that's one thing. Now, but going back to the question, I was at Hope, Sussex, which is an amazing place. It's a world first, in my opinion, where boys and girls can be themselves, learn by doing, learn growing skills. I don't know about fighting skills. I don't think they've got a martial artist on site, but I could be wrong. But they've got a table tennis table. They've got a kitchen where they can learn to cook and serve in the cafe. They've got some very awakened tutors, they're called there, and it's a community hub. And they have lots of visitors of all ages, and events run for the Freedom Network and for the hub itself. And one day I was there, I forget what event it was, but there was a little boy of about 8 just dumped his little scooter sideways on a path where people walk to and fro. So I'm thinking, oh, now there's a health and safety issue if ever I saw one. So rather than belittle the boy and shout and scream and tell him not to do that again, and how can he be so this and how can he be so that, which is not a method that I advocate, because that's going to cause brain damage, as I now know, and I knew it then anyway. We're going back only about 2 years. I just called him over. I said, excuse me, young man, could you just come over here? And he came over, and I said, I looked down at the scooter and I said, can you be absolutely 100% sure that no one is going to trip over that and break their leg? And I've never seen anyone move so fast. And he just picked it up and took it off with him and put it in a proper place.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to get angry, didn't have to humiliate him. He knew that he'd done the wrong thing, and he was waiting for someone to point it out, but point it out in a respectful way. And in an empowered way. So I empowered myself by asking a question, and I empowered him by allowing him to give the answer using body language, which was, "Ooh, I think you've got a point there, mister. Yes, I think I better put it in a safe place." And nice interaction. Now, what was the other story? I had another story, but about working with boys and girls. But oh yes. I was leading a ceremony, an opening ceremony at some festival, and being who I am, I thought, oh, this is an opportunity to get the kids involved, because they're always excluded. And that's another thing, people out there, please include your boys and girls, bring them to talks, but take them on the rallies. You know, that's another thing. We can really accelerate progress if the movement is seen to include boys and girls and mums and dads, grandma, grandpa. So at this opening ceremony, I got the grown-ups to stand still, and I said to the kids, right, off you go and do whatever comes natural. And afterwards, one or two of the grown-ups said to me, you scared the shit out of me, David. You know, I said, what do you mean I scared the shit out of you? I thought, I just didn't know what the kids were going to do. So we don't trust our own kids to do the right thing. So in other words, there's something in our psyche that has pre-criminalized children. They're already guilty. They're already guilty before they even open their mouths or do anything. That is wrong. And that is compliance with the globalist system. So we have to bring in a presumption of innocence back, not just for ourselves, but in particular for boys and girls. Until we are running a presumption of innocence, we can't call ourselves common law practitioners.
No, I mean, that's a good phrase, like the presumption of innocence, because, you know, I recently had, let's just say, a discussion with the security at Asda supermarket. And what it was I went into whatever, grab a hold of something quickly. So I just went to the self-service checkout, so couldn't be bothered to queue up. Not that there's many to actually queue up now anyway. And, you know, I hate, and then I can see my face, like huge, big screen, bigger than the one I'm looking at now. So, like, you know, and I put my a carrier bag on top of their camera so you couldn't see it. And, you know, did whatever I did. And then the woman, I can't remember, she had to come over and click a button anyway, because it keeps freezing all the time, doesn't it? And she ripped the bag off the top of the machine, started walking away, and I went, oh, hang on, that's my bag. I need it to put my stuff in. And she was very funny. And anyway, you could see them all whispering to each other. And then when I was walking out, it's quite a big supermarket. And, you know, I seen the security all whispering to each other. And I thought, oh, here we go. So I got to the door and they were like, you know, don't you dare put that thing on top of the camera again. That's for security. And I was just like, well, And I said, it's actually my data that you're taking there. So you have to be careful about that. You know, I haven't given any consent to that. And under the GDPR, when you're looking at paragraph 6, you should actually have my signed consent. And they went ballistic, you know, but I was actually saying it to wind them up anyway. But, you know, knowing I was in the right, but still. But then you think, a lot of people, which is what just annoys me slightly, they always say the same thing. If you've got nothing to hide, then you shouldn't mind everybody filming in you, like, and seeing everything that you do. And you think, well, that's not really true, because what they're actually doing is they're actually saying everyone is a criminal. So we need to watch everybody to catch the one that's not good enough to get caught. You know, it's not good enough to get away with it, and they will get caught. And I think that there is probably being installed in the way, and I'd be looking to see if I was actually guilty of it as well, is not allowing the children to make the right decisions themselves. Maybe, you know, I'm trying to think backwards about, you know, hope that I wouldn't be like that. I bet you I probably have been guilty of it, certainly at times, you know, like bringing up children as well as actually teaching them for, you know, over 30 years. But hopefully I wasn't too bad. But do you know what I mean, though, about like the whole thing with everything now, instead of being a presumption of innocence, is definitely a presumption of guilt. And we need to watch every single thing everyone's doing, even when you just go and buying a couple of bunch of bananas in the supermarket.
And what they're doing in schools is they're priming and grooming the next generations for that level of intrusiveness and invasion of privacy. I think the current stats suggest that 90% of all school pupils use their biometric data, so facial recognition or fingerprint, to actually get into school or to gain access to school facilities. And if we're not careful within schools, that number will very soon be 100%, which is why we need a critical mass of boys and girls out of school, where they can maintain the presumption of innocence and the presumption of privacy, and the presumption that my life is my life, and it's not to be surveilled, judged, evaluated, assessed by external agencies or forces. And those people in those shop assistants or were just engaging in that gossip, that gossipy, snitchy Stockholm syndrome effect that saw people call the police when people weren't wearing masks or having social events at home during the alleged lockdown. And so everyone bigs up, you know, the World Economic Forum this and the World Health Organization that, but really at the end of the day, we can win this at a local level, grassroots level, by making sure that we are not defeated by Stockholm syndrome, by snitches, by people whose brains have gone, brain dead, brain damaged. And that's where we need to be focused. And so you did the best thing. Peter said, look, you need my written explicit consent. You just very matter-of-factly. And they went into meltdown because, you know, it's like when you go to a scanner at the airport and you say, no, I don't consent to being scanned, but you may manually frisk me with respect and dignity. And then the word goes around, oh, we've got a resistor. They call us resistors. We've got a resistor, you know, so, and that may well be the best word. So we need a critical mass of resistance, and that's what we need to keep building.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be offended. I know I hate that word, but you know, if somebody called me a resistor, I think I'd be quite happy with that. You know.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I'm just thinking about as well, talking about the hippocampus and the damage from all of the shouting, which it's like I don't think there was any teacher throughout my whole school and knew how to actually talk whatsoever. I think it was just like it was either screaming and shouting at you, or everything was silent, and you weren't allowed to move or speak or do anything, you know.
Well, that sounds like, just interrupting a second, that sounds like classic narcissistic patterns, you know, like the narcissist cannot see you. That for you, for them, you don't exist. You're just a thing that needs modifying, controlling, putting in its place, and there's no negotiation. There's no meeting you halfway. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the thing is as well, I'll say something about that in a second, because that was what I wanted to actually talk about, was that narcissistic thing. But you know, from a personal life experience, you know, I literally left school at 16. I had no qualifications. I was not interested in anything whatsoever. I couldn't focus to actually be caring about, like, you know, an A, B, C, D, or E, or whatever it was, you know, in whichever, you know, I think they did GCEs and CSEs when I was at school. Can't really get my head around it. And then I went straight into the military, straight into the armed forces, and they was and they're screaming and shouting at you even more, you know. So yes, I'm amazed now when I think about it that I can actually speak. If I think about the brain damage that I must have had, you know, with all the screaming and shouting, going straight from that literally horrendously abusive school system to then go into yeah, it was actually a horrendously abusive, physically and mentally abusive military system as well.
Yeah,
I'm surprised I'm here.
Can I just cut in to say that I do have time constraints, and I'd really appreciate it if you feel that we've got lots of more fertile ground. Could we do a part 2 another time?
Absolutely, 100%. That's what I was just going to say anyway. I was going to about call it a day anyway, because what I do like is roughly about an hour, so that people are desperate to listen to more. And yeah, but absolutely, certainly we'll do that. But just before we go then, I mean, I've actually got your website up on here. I'm going to share it and everything on the links and that. But is there anything else that you want to say or tell people what you're doing right now before we go?
Well, yeah, on the website, you'll find details of the course that I run online, and a link to the book, School No Place for Children. There's also, if you go on the free resources page, I'm putting out these info packs that you can scan to download the, mind you, if you're on the website, you can download it directly. The first one is called Universal Self-Protection. If another nonsense pandemic comes, then it will help you to keep sane and safe and lower the risk of arrest. And that's aimed at gatherings. So that's Universal Self-Protection. Know your rights at gatherings, events, rallies, and public events. There's a follow-up called, which is just below it on the same page, the free resources page, which is individual and family protection, which is for police stopping you as an individual, or agents threatening to come to your home or actually coming to your home, plus being cold called by the banks or by debt collectors or whatever. And then the next one I'm going to put out, the third info pack, will be one that deals with health crises, health emergencies. So, you know, how to fend off mask mandates, jab mandates, distancing, all that nonsense, what to say, what to do. I'm in Burnley, like I said, on Sunday. So you go on the events page to look at where I'm going to be in the near future. And I think that's just about it. If you need links, well, no, I think if just link to the site, and then people have got enough places to go to from the site. Well, let's keep it simple. So it's,
I'll put the links in the description tied to it wherever I go. So, but anyway, right. So if anybody wants to go and have a look, it's thepeopleslawyeruk.com. Okay, so make sure you get that correct. Thepeopleslawyeruk.com, and then you'll see all the links and see everything that's going on. So,
and there's also there's also links to the YouTube channel and to the Telegram channel, and those are my major 3 platforms: the website, YouTube channel, and Telegram channel. Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Make sure all that gets on there as well. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for coming along. Been great, and we'll definitely have another chat sometime in the near future. Just keep going, because we could have just kept talking for hours and hours. I don't even think we actually touched on what I'd really thought about talking about, but it's always like that, because I do like people to sort of like give a background and what's really been going on to get us into the positions that we're in, you know. So I appreciate everything. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us all of that information. So
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate your style. Very laid back. You just sit there while the speaker just goes on and on and on, and I can do that, as some people will often prone to tell me. But be a pleasure to come back again, Peter, and maybe explore some of the things that you actually had on your notepad.
Brilliant. Okay, well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. Remember that, so like, you know, click the like button, share it, and leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe and go and check out the links to be in the actual description anyway. And thank you very much, and we'll see you all later.